I'll strip this fool bare right now. Then we'll fly to the Maldives at her expense." The husband laughed, with his mother-in-law in court. Everyone was stunned by how I taught them a lesson, even the judge. But before I begin, I ask you to like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you, and enjoy listening. The briefcase lay on the chair in the hallway, slightly open. Elena was walking past when she noticed the edge of a document peeking out from the leather folder. Usually she didn't touch Stanley's things, but something made her stop. Maybe intuition, maybe just chance. She pulled out the sheets and scanned the text. Deed of gift. Their lake house. Grantee. Linda Marie Anderson. Her mother-in-law. Elena didn't cry out, didn't drop the papers, didn't run to her husband with accusations. She stood in the hallway, holding the document in her hands, and her brain worked coldly and clearly. 36 years of life had taught her not to panic ahead of time. Her law degree suggested first information, then action. She took out her phone and photographed each page. She checked the quality of the shots twice. Then she carefully put the document back in the folder, fastened the briefcase, and put it back in place. Her hands didn't tremble. Her breathing remained steady. Inside there were no tears, no hysterics, only icy concentration. The lake house was built 3 years ago with her money. After her divorce from her first husband, she sold her 2-bedroom condo for $480,000. The entire amount went into construction. Stanley said then that he would invest his share later, when funds became available from the business. The money never appeared, but Elena didn't bring up the topic. She thought it didn't matter for the family. What difference did it make whose money it was if they lived together? Now, apparently, there was a difference. In the evening, Stanley returned from work at 8:30, tired but satisfied. He kissed her on the cheek, automatically asked about dinner. Elena placed a plate of roasted chicken and vegetables in front of him, sat opposite with a cup of tea, watching him eat while checking his phone between bites. "Stan, are you planning to do something with real estate?" He flinched just a little, but she noticed. His gaze froze for a second. Then the man pulled himself together and shrugged. "No. Why?" His voice sounded natural, too natural for a person caught off guard. "A colleague at work was talking about deeds of gift. She says it's more tax efficient than a will." Stanley nodded, as if the topic didn't concern him at all. "Maybe. I don't know much about these things." He was lying. Elena saw it in the tension of the muscles around his eyes and how he focused too much on his plate. He lied easily and casually to the wife he had lived with for 14 years. That meant this wasn't the first time. That meant there was already a whole history of deception behind him. "I see," she said, and sipped her tea. They didn't talk any more that evening. Stanley went to his home office. She stayed in the kitchen. A chain of logical conclusions was building in her head. A deed of gift doesn't just appear. It's prepared by lawyers, recorded at the county recorder's office. It's a process that requires time and money. Her husband was seriously investing in this scheme. The only question was why. The answer was obvious: divorce and division of property. If the house formally belongs to her mother-in-law, in a divorce Elena would get nothing. Her investment of $480,000 would simply evaporate. Beautiful, cynical, vile. In the morning, when Stanley left for work and the children went to school, Elena took her driver's license and went to the county recorder's office. The line stretched for half an hour, but she waited patiently. She requested official property records for all assets: the lake house, the 3-bedroom house in the suburbs, the garage unit in their condo building. The documents were promised to be ready in 5 business days. Elena thanked the clerk and went outside. The day was clear and sunny. People around were smiling, hurrying about their business, while inside her sat a cold lump of foreboding that the worst was yet to come. Work helped her not to think. Elena held the position of corporate counsel for a large retail chain, dealing with contracts with suppliers and landlords. Routine, numbers, clauses. All this distracted her from thoughts about her husband and the strange document. But in the evenings, when the children did their homework and Stanley sat in his office, she replayed the situation in her head again and again. 5 days later, she received the records, sat in the car right in the county building parking lot, and opened the first envelope. The lake house, everything was clean. Owners, she and her husband in equal shares. The house the same, but the garage unit. Elena reread the lines 3 times. The garage unit had transferred to the ownership of Linda Marie Anderson 2 months ago. Basis, deed of gift. Grantor, Elena Marie Anderson. She had never in her life signed any deed of gift. Her hands clenched on the steering wheel. Not from fear, not from panic, from rage. Cold, calculating rage. Her signature had been forged. Legally, this meant fraud, a criminal offense, and it was committed by the people closest to her, her husband and his mother. Elena started the car and drove home. On the way, she stopped at a UPS store and overnight a request to a forensic document examiner. The expert worked quickly. For an additional fee, he promised results in a week. She paid without hesitation. At home, Elena took an old digital voice recorder from the hall closet. She had once bought it to record lectures in college. Then the device gathered dust and used. Now it came in handy. She checked the batteries, recording quality, microphone sensitivity. Everything worked perfectly. She installed the recorder behind books on the shelf in the living room. The place was not chosen by chance. Stanley loved to talk on the phone right there, pacing between the sofa and the window. She turned on the recording and went to prepare dinner. She didn't have to wait long. That same evening, her husband settled in the living room with a glass of bourbon and his phone. Elena pretended to be busy in the kitchen, but listened to every word. "Mom, everything is going according to plan. The paperwork for the lake house is almost ready. All that's left is to find the right notary. No, she doesn't notice anything. She cooks, takes the kids to school. A typical obedient wife. Listen, this is the 3rd document I forged with her signature. The first 2 went through without problems. Of course I'm being careful. The main thing is that she doesn't wise up before the divorce. Then it will be too late to prove anything." Elena stood at the stove, slowly stirring the sauce. The 3rd document. So besides the garage, there was something else. What exactly? A bank account, investment portfolio, savings account. Come on, Mom. She's clueless. Not once in 14 years has she checked anything. Never looked into paperwork. A convenient wife, what can I say? She gave birth to kids, cooks, cleans, and now she served her purpose. Stanley's voice sounded cheerful, carefree. He described life with her as if he were talking about an unsuccessful appliance purchase. Without emotion, without regret. Just stating a fact. Use got bored, time to throw away. Elena turned off the stove and went to the bedroom. She lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Nothing changed inside. No tears, no despair. Only a clear understanding. War had been declared, and she was not going to lose. The next day after work, Elena stopped by Tara's office. They had met 5 years ago at a continuing legal education seminar on corporate law and occasionally crossed paths at bar association events. Tara ran a solo practice specializing in family law. She was about 50. The woman looked strict and professional. Short haircut, business suit, no jewelry except a watch. Elena laid out on the table printouts of property records, photographs of the deed of gift from her husband's briefcase, the recording of the conversation on the voice recorder. Tara carefully studied the materials, occasionally marking something in a legal pad. When she listened to the audio, she shook her head. This is textbook fraud. Federal charges. Your husband and his mother could get real prison time. I know. And you're ready to go all the way? Absolutely. Tara thought, tapping her pen on the desk. Just don't rush. If you go to the FBI now, they can deny everything, say they were planning but changed their minds, or that you misunderstood the conversation. We need to catch them in the act, when they've already committed the crime completely, with no way to back out. So let them rob me. Let them think they're robbing you, but actually you'll be one step ahead. Elena nodded. The logic was ironclad. In law, evidence is always crucial, irrefutable, and concrete. Let the husband and mother-in-law go all the way. Let them think they've won, and then she'll strike so that they won't understand where it came from. How much time do we have? Judging by the document you found, they're planning to finalize everything in the next 2 to 3 months. Be on alert. Play the role of a naive wife who suspects nothing. I've been playing that role for 14 years, Elena noted dryly. Tara smirked. Now you'll play it consciously, and for that you'll get everything you're entitled to. Returning home, Elena prepared dinner as usual. She met Stanley with a smile, asked about his day, set the table. Her husband ate, told her something about a new deal at work. She nodded, agreed, asked questions. The perfect wife. Inside, a plan was already being built, cold, precise, merciless. A few days later, Linda arrived. Usually the mother-in-law visited them once a month, no more. The woman had never been distinguished by warm relations with her daughter-in-law. Spoke curtly, looked critically at the cleanliness of the house, at the children, at the food. Elena was used to this coldness and paid no attention. But now everything had changed. Homemade apple pie and a box of chocolates. She sat in the kitchen and began asking about health, about work, about the children. Vera and Greg were perplexed. Grandma usually communicated with them rather coolly, but now she suddenly showered them with compliments, stroked their heads, was interested in their grades. The children exchanged glances, but answered politely. When the children went to their rooms, Linda poured herself coffee and moved to the main point. Elena, honey, I've been thinking. You know, I'm already 63. My health isn't what it used to be. My heart's been acting up. I want to help you while I can. Help? Elena feigned interest. Well, yes. You have this house in the suburbs, beautiful place, but the property taxes keep going up every year. And then, if something happens with Stan's business, creditors can go after the property. The business seems to be doing fine. Now it's fine, but tomorrow who knows? The economy is unstable. Here's what I'm thinking. Let's put the house in my name temporarily, just on paper. And when I pass away, well, someday everything will go to the kids anyway, and it'll be easier with taxes and estate planning, and you'll be protected from business risks. Elena made a thoughtful face. Inside, she wanted to laugh at the audacity of the scam. Her mother-in-law spoke so convincingly, so caringly, as if she really cared about the family's welfare. A good actress, nothing to say. Linda, but why such complications? No complications, honey. Just smart planning, for your own good. Elena paused, as if pondering. I need to think about it. Her mother-in-law's face became hard for a moment, but the woman quickly pulled herself together and smiled again. Of course, sweetie, think about it, but don't wait too long. You never know what might happen. When Linda left, Elena went to the living room. Stanley was sitting on the sofa with his laptop. Seeing his wife, he looked up. Well, did Mom talk to you? She talked about the house. And what do you think? Elena shrugged. I don't know. It sounds kind of odd. Stanley frowned. Irritation flashed in his eyes, but he quickly hid it behind an indifferent mask. Okay, it's up to you. They didn't discuss the topic anymore that evening, but Elena saw that her husband was tense, dissatisfied with her indecision. So the plan with his mother was serious, so they were in a hurry. A week passed. Stanley became colder, came home late, left somewhere on business on weekends. Elena didn't ask, didn't reproach, continued to play her role. And then what she was waiting for happened. In the evening, when the children went to bed, Stanley entered the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. Elena was reading a book, looked up at him. Elena, we need to talk. I'm listening. He was silent, choosing his words. His face was serious, almost sad. You know, I've been thinking, we've somehow grown apart. Haven't you noticed? Elena, closed her book. In what sense? Well, we live in the same house, but we're like roommates. You're with the kids and work, I'm with my business. I don't feel that connection we had before. And what are you suggesting? Stanley sighed, feigning regret. Maybe we should separate before we become complete strangers to each other. Elena was silent. Inside, she was triumphant. Here it began, but her face maintained a confused, almost frightened expression. What do you mean? What about the children? The kids will adjust. Vera is already 14. Greg is 10. They're not babies. We're adults. We'll divide everything fairly, no drama. The word fairly resonated in her ears. Elena squeezed the book in her hands, but her voice remained calm. Is this a final decision? I think so. We'll both be better off. Okay, let me think about it. Stanley nodded and left the bedroom. Elena remained sitting on the bed, staring into space. So this is how it's done? Calmly, without yelling, almost amicably. You announce a divorce. Divide the property that you've already secretly transferred. Beautiful, cynical, disgusting. She stood up, walked to the window. The sky was darkening outside. Streetlights were glowing. Somewhere out there, ordinary people lived with ordinary problems, and here a real war was unfolding, quiet, invisible, but merciless. Elena took out her phone and texted Tara. He announced the divorce. Time to act. The answer came in a minute. Perfect. Get the documents ready. Soon they'll hang themselves. The next morning, Elena went to the bank and checked all accounts in her name. 2 of 3 were empty, and one had nearly $60,000. Her bonus from last year. The money disappeared 3 weeks ago. The transfer went to Linda Marie Anderson. Elena requested a statement, saved it to her phone. Another piece of evidence. Another nail in their coffin. In the evening, as if nothing had happened, she prepared dinner. Stanley came, ate silently, went to his room. The children did their homework. Elena helped Greg with math. An ordinary evening of an ordinary family. Only inside her everything was boiling. 2 days later, the forensic document examination results arrived. The signature on the garage unit deed of gift did not belong to Elena. The expert indicated numerous discrepancies. The slope of letters, pressure, stroke patterns. The conclusion was unambiguous, forgery. Elena put the report in a folder with the rest of the documents. The arsenal was growing. Soon it would be possible to strike. And life went on as usual. Stanley became even colder, barely spoke. The children felt the tension. Vera asked several times if everything was okay. Elena calmed her daughter, said that adults have difficult periods, but everything would work out. Only she knew that nothing would work out. Everything was just beginning. One evening, when Stanley was again sitting in the living room with his phone, the voice recorder captured another conversation. Mom. She agreed to the divorce, no hysterics, no drama. She took it so quietly. Yeah, easy. Now the main thing is to transfer the house while she's still in shock. The lawyer says we need to do it before filing the divorce papers. No, she's clueless. She won't suspect anything. I'm telling you, we lived 14 years, and she never once looked at the paperwork. A housewife, basically. Elena listened to the recording the next morning when her husband left for work. Housewife, clueless, easy. Each word hit precisely on target, but brought no pain. Only anger. Cold, crystal clear anger. She copied the recording to a flash drive, took it to Tara. The lawyer listened, nodded. They're burying themselves. All that's left is to wait for the final move. When do you think they'll do it? Soon. The divorce is already on the table. They're rushing. Maybe in a couple weeks, they'll ask you to sign some papers. That's when we'll strike. Elena returned home. In the mailbox, she found an envelope from a law firm. Inside was a notice. Stanley had filed for divorce. She was requested to appear for a preliminary hearing in 3 weeks. So there was little time left. They would pressure, rush, try to finalize everything before court. Elena was ready. She took out her laptop, opened a new document, and began to write. In detail, structured, with citations to statutes. She described each episode of fraud, each forgery, each money transfer, attached copies of documents, links to recordings. This was her counterattack, carefully planned, legally sound, merciless. By midnight, the document was ready. Elena reread it twice, checked every comma, then saved it to a flash drive and emailed a copy to Tara. The lawyer replied in an hour, "Brilliant. They don't know who they're dealing with." Elena closed the laptop and went to bed. For the first time in recent weeks, calmness settled inside. Not relief, not joy, just cold confidence that everything was going according to plan. In the morning, Stanley said at breakfast, "Mom wants to meet with you to talk about the property settlement. She suggests we handle everything amicably, out of court." Elena was spreading butter on toast without looking up. "Okay, when?" "Tonight. She'll come over." "Sounds good." Stanley finished his coffee and left. Elena remained in the kitchen, finishing her toast. So today they would make their move and she would respond. The chess game was entering the endgame. In the evening, Linda appeared exactly at 7. She wore an elegant burgundy dress. Her hair was styled, makeup subtle. She looked respectable, trustworthy. The three of them sat in the kitchen. The mother-in-law laid out some papers on the table and began to explain. "Elena, honey, Stan told me everything. You've decided to divorce. It's sad, of course, but these things happen. The main thing now is to divide everything fairly. Here I've prepared a draft settlement agreement. Look, the house stays with you and the children. The lake house goes to Stan, the garage unit to me." Elena listened, nodded. Inside, she was laughing at the absurdity of the situation. The garage was already registered to her mother-in-law illegally. The lake house was planned to be transferred to her as well, and the house was the only thing they magnanimously left her, though they'd probably try to take that later too. "Why does the garage unit go to you?" Elena asked in an innocent tone. Linda didn't even flinch. "Well, it's already in my name. You signed the deed yourself 2 months ago. Don't you remember?" "All right. I signed it. Here, look, a copy of the document." The mother-in-law handed over a sheet. There was Elena's signature, forged, crudely done, but at first glance similar. Elena took the document, studied it carefully, then looked up at her mother-in-law. "I see. Well, good then. So sign the settlement and we can all move on peacefully." Linda held out a pen. Elena took it, twirled it in her fingers. Stanley sat across from them, watching. In his eyes was tense anticipation. "You know what?" Elena said slowly. "I also prepared something." She took her folder from her bag, put it on the table, opened it, took out the first document. "Here's the forensic document examination report. The signature on the garage unit deed doesn't belong to me. It's a forgery." Linda's face turned pale. Stanley froze. "What are you talking about?" he asked sharply. "I'm telling the truth. Here's a bank statement. $60,000 from my account was transferred to your mother's name without my knowledge. Here's a recording of your conversation with her, where you discuss how you're deceiving me." Elena played the voice recorder. Stanley's voice filled the kitchen. "Mom, she doesn't notice anything at all. I've already forged 3 documents with her signature." The mother-in-law jumped up, trying to snatch the recorder. Elena moved it away. "Don't touch it. This is evidence that's already been provided to my attorney and to law enforcement." Stanley turned white. What have you done?" Elena calmly gathered the documents back into the folder. "I protected my rights. What you were planning is fraud, a federal crime. Forging signatures, illegal property transfer, theft from a bank account. You get serious prison time for this." Linda clutched her chest, groaned. A typical performance. Elena didn't fall for it. "Stop the act. I have a letter from your cardiologist. Your heart is fine. Where did you get that?" Stanley yelled. I requested it through proper legal channels. I'm a lawyer, I know how it's done. Silence reigned. Stanley and his mother exchanged glances. In their eyes were confusion, fear, anger. Elena, let's be reasonable. Her husband spoke in a different tone. Okay, we had some ideas, but we didn't actually do anything wrong. We can give back the garage unit, return the money. Let's just forget about this. Too late. The complaint to the FBI has been filed. Examinations have been conducted. The investigation is open. You. Linda hissed, and all her feigned kindness evaporated. Ungrateful bitch. We gave you everything and you. You gave me lies and betrayal. Now you'll get what you deserve. Elena stood up, took her bag. You can go. All further communication through attorneys only. Stanley tried to block her way. You'll regret this. I'll destroy you, leave you with nothing. Elena looked at him coldly. You have nothing to destroy me with. The lake house was built with my money. I can prove it. The house is in joint ownership. The garage unit was illegally transferred. The transaction will be voided, and you and your mother will face federal charges. So there'll be no one left to destroy anyone. She left the kitchen, went up to her room, locked the door, sat on the bed, folded her hands on her knees. Everything inside was trembling, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from the tension of recent weeks, from the realization that the first blow had been struck. Voices rang out downstairs. Stanley and his mother were arguing furiously about something. Then the front door slammed. The mother-in-law left. Elena took out her phone, texted Tara, "Round one is mine." They're in shock. The answer came instantly. Excellent. Get ready for round 2. It's going to get ugly. Elena lay on the bed, closed her eyes. Yes, it would get ugly. But she wouldn't stop now. She'd gone too far, learned too much, gotten too angry. Ahead was court, proceedings, possibly public scandal. But she had passed the point of no return and now would see it through to the end, no matter what it cost. She couldn't sleep that night. Elena sat by the window, looking at the dark street, at the lights of neighboring houses, thinking about how quickly what seemed unshakable collapses. 14 years of marriage, 2 children, a shared home. All this turned out to be fiction, a beautiful wrapper under which cold calculation and betrayal were hidden. Stanley didn't try to come to her. He sat in his office all night. She heard him talking on the phone, probably consulting with attorneys, trying to find a way out, but there was no way out. Elena had calculated everything, anticipated everything. In the morning, her husband left without even saying goodbye. Elena got the children ready for school as usual. Vera looked at her anxiously. "Mom, is everything okay with you and Dad?" "Not quite, sweetie. But don't worry, adults will figure it out. Are you getting divorced?" Elena didn't lie. "Yes, but that doesn't mean we've stopped loving you and Greg. It's just that Dad and I can't live together anymore." Vera nodded, her eyes filling with tears. Elena hugged both children, stroked their heads. Everything inside clenched with pain for them. They didn't deserve such a father, didn't deserve this nightmare. In the evening, an unknown number called. Elena picked up. "Elena Anderson, this is Attorney Richard Morrison. I represent Stanley Anderson and Linda Anderson." The voice was arrogant, self-confident. "I'm listening. My clients are ready to settle this matter amicably. They'll return the garage unit, return the money, and you drop the complaint with law enforcement. Agreed?" "No. Don't be hasty. Think about it. Litigation will drag on for years, and you'll spend a fortune on legal fees. Why put yourself through that?" "Because justice is more important than money and time." Richard chuckled. "Justice? How idealistic. Well, see you in court. Fair warning, I don't lose cases. There's always a first time." She hung up. So Stanley had hired an attorney, obviously an expensive and experienced one. But that didn't change the situation. The evidence was rock solid. Tara confirmed the concern. Richard Morrison is well known, specializes in high-stakes divorce cases, has won seemingly impossible cases. It won't be easy. But we have the evidence. Yes, and that's our strongest weapon. The key is not letting him muddy the waters, confuse the court with emotional appeals and manipulation. Elena prepared, reread statutes, studied case law, rehearsed her testimony. Tara helped, corrected, gave advice. 2 weeks passed. A summons arrived for a preliminary hearing on property division. The date was set for 10 days later. Elena took time off work, devoted the whole day to preparation. Tara ran a mock examination, asked provocative questions, tried to rattle her, tested her composure. You're doing great, staying cool under pressure. The key is don't let emotions take over. Morrison will definitely try to get a rise out of you. I'm ready. In the evening, Karen called. Elena, I've got everything ready. My testimony, documents from my divorce, contact information for 2 other women that Stanley defrauded. They've agreed to testify. Thank you so much. This will make a huge difference. I want them to pay for what they did, not just to you, but to all of us. Elena understood that desire. Revenge? No, not revenge, justice. Long overdue, hard-won justice. The night before the preliminary hearing, Elena barely slept. She lay staring at the ceiling, rehearsing tomorrow in her head, meeting with the opposing counsel, testimony, cross-examination. In the morning, she got up early, showered, put on a tailored charcoal gray suit, pulled her hair into a neat bun. Minimal makeup, just foundation and nude lipstick. She looked professional, composed. In the mirror was reflected an unfamiliar woman. Tough, cold, determined. Not at all that accommodating wife who for 14 years had overlooked her husband's indifference and never questioned anything. Mom, you look amazing, Vera said, peeking into the bedroom. Thanks, honey. You're going to win. Elena turned to her daughter. I'll do everything in my power. Vera hugged her mother. I believe in you. Those words gave her strength. Elena took her briefcase, documents, car keys. One more time she checked that everything was there. Statements, examinations, recordings, witness affidavits. Everything was ready. She left the house, got in the car, started the engine. Ahead was court, confrontation, possibly dirty tactics from Stanley's lawyer. But she wasn't afraid. She was ready to fight to the end, because justice was worth any effort. The county courthouse greeted visitors with imposing columns and marble floors. Elena climbed the steps slowly, feeling each step echo through her body. Next to her walked Tara with a briefcase full of documents. A little behind was Karen in a conservative navy suit. Stanley's ex-wife looked tense but resolute. In the 3rd-floor corridor, people had already gathered. Groups stood around, discussing their cases, nervously checking phones. Elena immediately spotted them. Stanley in an expensive charcoal suit, custom-tailored. Hair slicked back, face smug. Next to him was Linda in a beige dress with a pearl necklace, leaning on a cane, playing the frail elderly woman, though she usually power-walked through the mall faster than teenagers. A little to the side stood a man of about 40 in an expensive, dark suit. Attorney Richard Morrison. An arrogant smirk played on his face. He was saying something to Stanley, patting him on the shoulder. Everything's under control. Elena stopped at the courtroom door. Tara was verifying the witness list with the clerk. Karen nervously adjusted her purse strap. Stanley noticed his ex-wife, walked straight toward her. Linda hobbled behind, carefully portraying frailty. It's not too late to make this go away, Stanley said quietly, stopping a few feet away. Drop the complaint. I won't ask for half the house. We'll part ways amicably, no mess. Elena looked at him as if she could see right through him. You have no claim to my house. It was purchased with my money from the sale of my property before our marriage. Prove it, her husband smirked. I will. Linda reached out, tried to touch Elena's arm. Honey, let's be civil about this. Elena stepped back. I'm not your honey, and there's nothing civil about fraud. The mother-in-law recoiled as if she'd been slapped, her face twisted with malice. But she quickly pulled on a mask of a suffering elderly woman. The courtroom door opened. The clerk announced the session was starting. People filed inside. Elena entered with Tara, sat at the plaintiff's table. Karen settled behind them in the gallery. Stanley, with his mother, an attorney, took the defense table. The courtroom was modern but formal, with wood paneling and the state seal behind the judge's bench. It smelled of coffee and tension. The judge entered, a man of about 50, gray-haired, with a weathered face and sharp, intelligent eyes. Honorable James Whittaker, according to the nameplate. He sat down, adjusted his reading glasses, opened the case file. Case number. He recited a long docket number. Petition for dissolution of marriage and equitable distribution of property is now in session. Counsel, state your appearances. Tara stood. Tara Lewis, Your Honor, representing petitioner Elena Marie Anderson. Richard Morrison stood, buttoning his suit jacket. Richard Morrison, Your Honor, representing respondents Stanley James Anderson and Linda Marie Anderson. The judge nodded, made notes. The court has before it a petition for divorce, property division, and damages for fraud. Petitioner's counsel, you may proceed with your opening. Tara opened her folder, began presenting their case clearly and methodically. Divorce based on irretrievable breakdown. Property division accounting for separate property acquired before marriage. Damages related to fraudulent transfer and forgery. Richard jumped up before Tara finished. Your Honor, I must object. Counsel is making unsubstantiated allegations. My client, Linda Anderson, is a retired schoolteacher, a grandmother who devoted her life to her family. The petitioner is attempting to defame her and her son with baseless accusations. The attorney's voice was loud, confident. He was clearly playing for effect, hoping the judge would sympathize with an elderly woman. Tara didn't even blink. We have documentary evidence of fraud and forgery, Your Honor. I ask the court to admit the evidence. Richard scoffed. What evidence? Documents that could have been fabricated, recordings obtained through illegal surveillance. The court should reject such material. At that moment, the courtroom door opened. 2 men in dark suits entered. FBI agents. One carried a folder, the other surveyed the room. Apologies for the interruption, Your Honor. The senior agent, a man of about 40, addressed the judge. Special Agent Thomas Carter, FBI White Collar Crime Division. We've brought materials from an ongoing federal investigation into Stanley James Anderson and Linda Marie Anderson. The courtroom went silent. Stanley turned visibly pale. Linda gripped the cane handle. Her knuckles turned white. The judge frowned, took the folder from the agent. Explain. Based on a complaint filed by Elena Anderson, the FBI has opened an investigation into wire fraud, mail fraud, and identity theft. Our investigation has uncovered a pattern of fraudulent conduct targeting multiple victims over several years. The agent opened the folder, removed several documents. To date, we've identified 4 separate incidents involving 3 additional victims who provided sworn statements. I respectfully request these materials be made part of the court record. The judge reached out, took the documents, began reading, his frown deepening. Richard tried to object, but the judge held up his hand. One moment, counsel. I need to review these materials. Oppressive silence filled the courtroom. Elena sat perfectly still, hands folded on the table. Everything inside was vibrating with tension, but outwardly she remained completely composed. Stanley was furiously whispering to his attorney. Linda was dabbing her face with a tissue, feigning distress. The judge set the papers down. Agent Carter, please summarize the victims' statements for the record. Carter nodded, consulted his notes. Victim 1, Nina Roberts, Linda Anderson's distant cousin. In 2020, Mrs. Anderson convinced her to deed over a vacation property in her name, allegedly for estate planning purposes. After the transfer, Mrs. Anderson refused to reconvey the property, claiming it was now legally hers. Ms. Roberts lacked resources to challenge the transfer. Stanley twitched as if to speak, but his attorney grabbed his arm. Victim 2, Samuel Davis, former neighbor of Linda Anderson. In 2019, Mrs. Anderson borrowed $25,000 under the pretext of medical expenses. The money was never repaid. When Mr. Davis threatened legal action, Mrs. Anderson counter-threatened with defamation claims. He backed down. Linda jumped up, forgetting the cane and frailty. "That's all lies. They're conspiring against me." The judge's gavel came down hard. "Mrs. Anderson, sit down. One more outburst, and you'll be removed from this courtroom." The mother-in-law collapsed back onto her chair. Her face flushed, breathing rapid. The agent continued. Victim 3, Karen Brennan, former wife of Stanley Anderson. In her 2018 divorce, she lost all marital assets. Our investigation confirmed that 1 month before filing for divorce, Mr. Anderson fraudulently transferred their home, vehicle, and investment accounts into his mother's name. Ms. Brennan couldn't prove fraud at the time due to lack of evidence. The judge removed his glasses, cleaned them with a cloth. His expression was a mix of disgust and disbelief. 3 independent victims, plus the current case, plus forensic evidence of forgery. He looked at Linda and Stanley. "This doesn't look like coincidence, counsel." Richard tried to seize control. "Your Honor, these allegations are unrelated to the present divorce proceedings. This is a transparent attempt to prejudice the court against my clients." "On the contrary," Tara countered, "they establish a pattern of criminal conduct that goes directly to credibility and the respondent's scheme to defraud my client." The judge nodded. "The court will consider this evidence." "Continue, Ms. Lewis. Present your case." Tara opened her briefcase, removed neatly organized folders. "First, Your Honor, title records for the property at 247 Maple Drive, purchased by Mrs. Anderson in 2007 with proceeds from the sale of her separate property obtained in her first divorce. This property was never marital property with Mr. Stanley Anderson." She handed documents to the judge. Whitaker studied the papers, verified dates and amounts. Second, the forensic document examination report. Tara placed a thick-bound report on the table. A certified forensic document examiner determined that the signature on the garage unit deed does not belong to Elena Anderson. It's a forgery. The report details multiple discrepancies, stroke patterns, pressure points, slant angles, and letter formation. The judge took the report, began reviewing it. Stanley shot to his feet. "That examination is bogus. She could have paid some expert to say whatever she wanted." Tara's voice remained level. "The examination was conducted by Dr. Philip Martinez, a board-certified forensic document examiner with 30 years of experience who regularly testifies in federal court. His credentials are impeccable." Third, audio recording of Mr. Anderson discussing the fraudulent scheme with his mother. Tara placed the digital recorder on the table. "I ask the court to listen. That recording is inadmissible." Stanley nearly shouted. "Illegal wiretapping." Tara remained calm. The recording was made in Mrs. Anderson's own home, where she had every legal right to record. Under federal law, when one party to a conversation consents to recording, it's entirely legal. Moreover, there's no reasonable expectation of privacy when discussing criminal activity. The judge put on headphones and listened to the recording. His expression grew progressively grimmer. When Stanley's voice said, "I've already forged 3 documents with her signature," the judge's jaw tightened visibly. After listening, Judge Whitaker removed the headphones and set them down with deliberate care. The evidence is admitted. Mrs. Anderson, you may testify. Elena stood. All eyes turned to her. Stanley glared with hatred. Linda pressed her lips into a thin line. Karen in the gallery gave her an encouraging nod. Elena began speaking calmly, without emotion, simply stating facts. I married Stanley Anderson 14 years ago. I brought into the marriage a condominium I'd purchased with funds from my first divorce settlement. 3 years later, I sold that condo for $480,000 and used the entire proceeds to build the lake house. Stanley promised to contribute his share later, but never did. All construction costs were paid from my separate funds. She paused, looking directly at the judge. 2 months ago, I accidentally discovered in my husband's briefcase a deed transferring our lake house to his mother. I began investigating and discovered that a garage unit had already been illegally transferred into Linda Anderson's name using a forged signature. Additionally, $60,000 was wire transferred from my personal account to Mrs. Anderson without my authorization. Her voice remained steady, each word landing with precision. I installed a recording device in my own home and captured a conversation between Stanley and his mother discussing their plan to strip me of all assets before filing for divorce. This was not spontaneous misconduct. It was a calculated scheme they'd successfully executed against previous wives. Stanley jumped up, knocking over his chair. She's lying. This is complete fabrication. The judge's gavel crashed down, so hard it echoed through the courtroom. Mr. Anderson, one more word out of turn, and I will have you removed and proceed in your absence. Stanley sat, breathing heavily. Richard was whispering urgently in his ear, trying to calm him. Elena continued, I'm a licensed attorney. I understand exactly what happened here. Stanley Anderson and his mother have systematically defrauded multiple women, walking away from relationships with their victims' assets. This is not an isolated incident. It's a refined criminal enterprise, and I'm asking this court for justice. She sat down. Tara touched her shoulder in support. The judge made notes, then looked up. Cross-examination, Mr. Morrison? Richard stood, straightening his tie. Mrs. Anderson, you claim you solely funded the construction of the lake house, yet you were working as an in-house counsel. Where did $480,000 come from? Elena didn't hesitate. From the sale of my separate property obtained in my first divorce. I have the closing statements, wire transfer records, and construction payment receipts. Every dollar is documented and traced to my separate accounts. But you weren't working for the first years of this marriage. I took maternity leave and returned to work. I was then promoted to senior counsel with a salary of $85,000 plus bonuses. My W-2s and tax returns are in evidence. Richard realized he wasn't getting anywhere, changed tactics. What about your relationship with Stanley? You claim he planned this divorce, but perhaps you grew cold toward him and manufactured this fraud story to keep everything. Tara shot up. Objection. Counsel is badgering the witness with rank speculation. Sustained, the judge said sharply. Mr. Morrison, stick to the evidence or sit down. Richard sat, clearly frustrated. His psychological warfare had failed. The judge checked his watch. Any additional witnesses? Yes, Your Honor. Tara gestured to Karen. The petitioner calls Karen Brennan. Karen stood, walked to the witness stand, was sworn in. Please tell the court about your relationship with Stanley Anderson. Karen took a breath. We were married from 2014 to 2018. For years. We bought a house together, saved for our future, planned to start a family. But about 6 months before he asked for a divorce, Stanley became distant, cold, secretive. I thought he was stressed about work. Her voice was steady but strained. Then one day he announced he wanted a divorce. No explanation. Just said he didn't love me anymore. I agreed to separate amicably. I assumed we'd divide our assets fairly. But when we got to settlement negotiations, I discovered everything was gone. The house, the car, our investment accounts. All transferred to Linda Anderson. I tried to challenge it, but I had no proof of fraud. The court sided with them. Did you suspect at the time this was a deliberate scheme? No. I thought I'd just married the wrong person. But now I understand it was premeditated. They'd done this before, and they did it again. Richard jumped on cross. Ms. Brennan, you're obviously bitter about your divorce. Isn't this testimony just an attempt at revenge against your ex-husband? Karen looked at him with quiet contempt. This is about justice, not revenge. I want him to be held accountable for what he did to me and these other women. No further questions. Karen returned to her seat. The judge reviewed the case file. Mr. Anderson, you may testify. Stanley stood. His face was pale, but he tried to project confidence. Your Honor, my ex-wife and current wife are trying to paint me as some kind of con artist, but that's not true. I was just trying to protect business assets. My company has had some financial difficulties. If creditors came after me, I wanted to make sure my family had security. By forging your wife's signature. Stanley faltered. That's a misunderstanding. Maybe the expert made an error. A board-certified expert with 30 years of experience. The judge raised an eyebrow. And the recorded conversation where you admit to forging 3 separate documents. Stanley stared at the floor, silent. The judge turned to Linda. Mrs. Anderson, do you wish to testify? The mother-in-law stood shakily, leaning heavily on the cane. Her voice quavered. Your Honor, I'm just an old woman. I worked as a teacher for 40 years, raised my son alone. I was only trying to help my family. Elena agreed to everything. She signed willingly. Willingly. The judge opened the forensic report. So this is your daughter-in-law's actual signature. Well, maybe I'm confused. You're confused about forging documents and stealing $60,000? Linda had no answer, and then something snapped. She straightened up, throwing the cane aside. Her face contorted with rage. Why is everyone defending this stupid bitch? She screamed so loudly that people in the gallery gasped. She's nobody. Cooked, cleaned, popped out kids, that's it. No other value. I'll strip this fool bear right now. Then we'll fly to the Maldives at her expense. She laughed, a harsh, unhinged laugh. Stanley froze for a second, then started laughing too, nervously, desperately, but laughing as if they'd already won, as if this was all just a game. The courtroom fell into shocked silence. The court reporter's fingers flew across the steno machine, recording every word. Agent Carter exchanged looks with his partner, shaking his head. Karen clenched her fists. Judge Whitaker sat with his mouth literally hanging open, staring at Linda and Stanley as if seeing them clearly for the first time. He slowly removed his glasses, cleaned them, replaced them. His face showed a mixture of shock and revulsion. Elena sat perfectly calm, looked at the judge, and said quietly, I think the testimony speaks for itself, Your Honor. Judge Whitaker seemed to snap out of his stupor. He picked up the gavel but set it down without using it. When he spoke, his voice was ice cold. Mrs. Anderson, do you comprehend what you just said in open court? Linda suddenly realized her mistake. She grabbed for the chair, tried to sit. Her face went from red to ashen. I didn't mean, it's my blood pressure. Richard leaped up, gesturing wildly. Your Honor, my client is clearly having a medical episode. She's not responsible for. The judge's look silenced him mid-sentence. Enough. I heard every word. It's in the record. He stood. This court is in recess for 30 minutes. When we return, I will render my decision. Judge Whitaker left the bench. The clerk followed. The courtroom erupted. People buzzed with conversation, pointing at Linda and Stanley. Stanley sat with his head in his hands. Linda clutched her chest, moaning. This time it looked genuine. Richard was furiously whispering to both clients, but they weren't responding. Elena walked into the corridor. Her legs felt weak, but she showed no sign of it. She sat on a bench, looked out the window at the gray sky. Tara sat beside her, squeezed her shoulder. They just destroyed themselves. Yes, you were incredible. Absolutely unshakable. Elena didn't answer, just kept looking out the window. Karen joined them. Thank you. I couldn't nail them back then, but you did. It's not over yet. It will be. Very soon. The 30 minutes felt eternal. Elena drank water from the fountain, checked her watch, counted minutes. Everything inside was clenched in anticipation. Finally, the courtroom door opened. The clerk called everyone back. They returned to their seats. Judge Whitaker entered, his face stern and unreadable. He sat, opened the file, picked up a prepared statement. In the matter of Anderson versus Anderson, he began formally, having reviewed the evidence, heard testimony from witnesses, and considered the arguments of counsel. This court makes the following findings and orders. Complete silence filled the room. 1. The marriage between Elena Marie Anderson and Stanley James Anderson is hereby dissolved. Stanley gripped the table edge. 2. The property at 247 Maple Drive is declared the separate property of Elena Marie Anderson, having been acquired with her premarital funds. Stanley Anderson has no claim to this asset. 3. The Lake House property at 89 Lakeshore Drive is declared the separate property of Elena Marie Anderson, having been entirely funded by her separate assets. Stanley Anderson has no claim to this asset. Linda made a choking sound, but the judge continued without pause. 4. The deed transferring the garage unit to Linda Marie Anderson is void ab initio due to forged signature. Full title is restored to Elena Marie Anderson. 5. Stanley James Anderson is ordered to pay Elena Marie Anderson compensatory damages in the amount of $60,000 for funds fraudulently transferred, plus $100,000 in punitive damages. Stanley grabbed his head. 6. All evidence of fraud, forgery, and identity theft is hereby referred to the FBI for criminal prosecution of Stanley James Anderson and Linda Marie Anderson. The judge removed his glasses, looked directly at the defendants. I must say, in 28 years on the bench, I presided over countless divorces and property disputes, but I have never witnessed such brazen, calculated fraud. The statement about the Maldives was particularly illuminating. He paused for emphasis. Everyone in this courtroom was stunned by how the petitioner exposed this scheme. Frankly, I was too. Judge Whitaker struck the gavel once. This matter is concluded. Linda suddenly slid from her chair to the floor, genuinely unconscious this time. Stanley rushed to his mother, shook her. Richard called 911. Elena stood, picked up her briefcase, walked out of the courtroom without looking back. In the hallway, Tara hugged her. Karen shook her hand firmly. You did it. Yes, I did. They walked downstairs, exited into overcast afternoon. A light rain had started. Elena tilted her face up to the drops, closed her eyes. It was over. The court had ruled. Justice had been served. But why wasn't there joy inside? Only emptiness and exhaustion. 2 weeks passed. Elena received a summons from the FBI field office. She went, gave detailed testimony, walked agents through the entire timeline, discovering the document, checking public records, forensic examination, recording conversations. The special agent took careful notes, asked clarifying questions. Thank you for your cooperation, Mrs. Anderson. The grand jury will be convening soon. Stanley and Linda were also brought in for questioning. Elena didn't know what they said, didn't care. It was no longer her concern. At home, the children coped in their own ways. Vera withdrew, stopped hanging out with friends. Her grades dropped. Teachers complained she seemed distracted. Greg started acting out, got into a fight at school, talked back to his teacher. The principal called Elena in. "Your son's behavior has become problematic." "I understand. We're going through a very difficult family situation. The divorce, the court case. The children are struggling. Have you considered counseling?" "We're already seeing someone." Elena took the kids to a therapist twice a week. A woman in her 50s, warm and professional, met with Vera and Greg individually, then with Elena. "Your children are processing trauma. Their father was their hero, and now he's been exposed as a criminal. That's devastating. They need time, patience, and consistent support." Elena also saw the therapist herself. She wasn't ashamed. She knew she needed help. The therapist explained coping strategies, how to support the children, how to release guilt. "You did everything right. You protected yourself and your children. Don't let guilt consume you." But guilt was there anyway. Maybe she should have seen the signs earlier. Maybe she could have prevented this somehow. Karen became a real friend. They met weekly for coffee, talked, sometimes just sat quietly. That was important too. "How are you holding up?" Karen asked. "Barely. But I'm managing." "You will get through this. You're stronger than you know." Neighbors gossiped. Elena heard whispers, saw judgmental looks. Some sympathized, others condemned. "She sent her husband to prison," one neighbor muttered. "She's no saint either." "He was robbing her blind," another countered. "She did the right thing." Elena tuned it out. Neighbors' opinions didn't matter. Money was tight. Stanley didn't pay the court-ordered damages. His business had collapsed, accounts were empty. The court froze what little remained, but there wasn't much to recover. Elena worked, earned her own way. They lived more modestly, no restaurants, no vacations, no luxury purchases. But she didn't complain. They had a home and honestly earned money. That was enough. 6 months later, the criminal trial was scheduled. Elena attended, sat in the public gallery, watched as Stanley and Linda were escorted in wearing prison jumpsuits. He'd lost weight, looked haggard. She'd aged dramatically, hair completely white now. The judge, a different judge for the criminal proceeding, read the verdict slowly, detailing each count: wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, forgery. "Stanley James Anderson, you are found guilty on all counts. The court sentences you to 48 months in federal prison." Stanley sat motionless, staring ahead. "Linda Marie Anderson, you are found guilty on all counts. The court sentences you to 60 months in federal prison." Linda wept quietly without drama. Elena watched them without satisfaction, without triumph. She just watched and thought, this is how it ends. Not victoriously, not dramatically. It just ends. As they led Stanley out, he spotted Elena, stopped abruptly. The marshal tried to move him along, but Stanley jerked free, shouted, "This isn't over. I'll get out, and you'll pay for this." Elena didn't respond. She simply turned and walked out of the federal courthouse. Life moved forward, slowly, difficultly, but forward. Vera gradually recovered, reconnected with friends. Her grades improved. Greg stopped the acting out, joined the wrestling team. The coach said the boy needed a physical outlet for his anger. Sports were healthy. Elena continued working, earned a promotion to general counsel. The raise helped stabilize their finances. One evening, a text came from Tara. Stanley was released early on good behavior. He's requesting supervised visitation with the kids. Elena was sitting in the kitchen with coffee when she read it. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then called the children. "Do you want to see your father? He's out of prison and asking to visit." Vera answered immediately, "No, I never want to see him again." Greg hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe once." "Okay, I'll arrange something." They met at a neutral location, a family diner. Elena brought Greg, sat at a nearby booth to supervise but gave them space. Stanley looked terrible, gaunt, balding, eyes hollow. He tried to smile, but it came out forced. "Greg," sat stiffly, barely spoke. Son, I'm so sorry. I made mistakes. Your grandmother, she influenced me. I wasn't thinking straight. The boy listened silently. I'm going to make things right. I'll get a job, pay child support. We can rebuild our relationship. Yeah. Greg looked at his father for a long moment. I don't know, Dad. I just don't know. The visit ended quickly. Stanley tried to hug his son, but Greg pulled away. They said goodbye awkwardly without warmth. In the car, Greg was quiet the whole drive. Only at home getting ready for bed, he said, Mom, I don't believe him. He lied about Grandma, making him do it. I don't believe him either. I don't want to see him again. Okay, sweetheart, you don't have to. Linda remained in prison. Her health deteriorated. 8 months after sentencing, she was transferred to the prison medical unit. She sent Elena a letter, begging forgiveness, pleading for a visit.